Jason DeFalco, Superintendent of Schools in Blackstone Millville, and really excited to be with you this evening with a small panel who I'll have introduce themselves in a moment to talk about a very serious and important topic, one that is certainly not something we like to address, but is something we have to address. And we are here this evening to have a community conversation around our training specifically for an active shooter or intruder, school intruder training. And this evening with us, we have three guests, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Jill, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm Jill Pillagallerani. I'm the Director of Learner Support Services.
Matt.
And I am Matt Aaronworth, the Assistant Superintendent.
And Dave.
My name is Officer David Lawden, and I am the School Resource Officer for the Blackstone Millville School District.
And I want to thank the panel for being here this evening, particularly Dave Loudon, who is our School Resource Officer. For those of you who may not be familiar, Officer Loudon is with us in our schools every day and helping to ensure that we're safe. And that's his top priority. And I can tell you for certain, after about 4 years of partnering with Officer Loudon, is something he takes very serious, and we're very grateful for that and for his commitment to the safety and of our students and staff every day. And so, with that, Officer Loudon's going to actually take a few minutes and walk our school community through a very important training. This training we have had an opportunity to go through as a staff and have done so year after year. Because in BMR, we have a mantra of we don't panic, we prepare. And that could not ring any more true, particularly when it relates to topics such as active shooter or any type of intruder in any of our buildings. And so as we go through the presentation, we're going to ask anyone tuning in to just hold questions to the end, and then we can do a big Q&A. Because some of your questions might be answered as Officer Loudon is walking us through the slide deck. And then at the end of the training, we're going to talk a little bit about some next steps as a school system and where do we go from here to make sure, again, that in any scenario, our school community is prepared. And so with that, Officer Loudon, if you would like to get us rolling, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you for those kind words, Dr. DeFalco. So I welcome you all to this training. This training has been rolled out, like Dr. DeFalco said, to the entire school district's staff. That's all of our paras, our teachers, our administration, all the way down the line to, I think we've covered every single employee in the district now, including cafeteria staff and custodial staff. So I'm happy to present this to you guys. About 3 or 4 years ago, we made a commitment to this ALICE training program, and we've fine-tuned it, and I think it's come out pretty good. Good, Jason?
Oh, good grief. Bear with me 1 second. Wouldn't you know it? I get this all queued up, and I got a technical thing. Hang on. Here we go. There we go.
Great. So what is an active shooter? An active shooter is a person who's immediately causing death or serious bodily injury. This isn't exclusive to somebody with a firearm. A violent intruder could be considered an individual with a knife or a bat or personal body weapons. It's important that we go over this because the media kind of has a fascination lately with the term active shooter, and they kind of use it loosely. Someone that commits a crime and passion or to a particular victim is not really an active shooter. An active shooter is those incidents like we've seen with these mass casualty type events. Some stats about active shooters in America. Between 2009 and 2020, 1,363 people in the United States were killed and 947 were wounded in 240 mass shootings. Obviously, that's 2020 stats, so we've had some unfortunately added to that number in 2021. That is an average of about 20 shootings each year. In nearly all of these shootings over the period, the shooter was an adult male who acted alone. 32% of mass shooters, or 92 of them, ended with the perpetrator dying by suicide, and another 24 were killed by responding law enforcement. The remaining 145 were taken into custody by law enforcement. And there are 23 which remain unknown, and that 23 is the fact that the FBI UCR crime stats do classify an active shooter mass casualty incident as anything more than 5, I believe it is, deaths in one incident. So a lot of those, all of those 23 are incidents of gangland type violence where the perpetrator was never identified. So firearms used. In most mass shootings, 81% involve the use of at least one handgun and 60% involve only handguns. Semi-automatic handguns are 3 times as common as an assault weapon to be used in mass shootings, and therefore they have resulted in a higher total body count from 1982 to 2021. Shooters had assault weapons in 28% of mass shootings, or 35 incidents. Shooters used only assault weapons as their sole weapon of choice in 15 incidents, or only 12% of mass shootings. Now, why is this important? I do not want to go down a political road at all. However, when mass shootings casualty happens, it obviously becomes a media event, and the politicians on both sides do tend to weigh in. And it's important to note that this is just not an issue that can be legislatively fixed. If we pass a law that bans a certain type of weapon, such as the assault weapon, we see here that handguns are involved in most of these shootings. So if we were to pass a law tomorrow and confiscate every assault weapon in America, we would still have to have this training. So the implications aren't something we can fix by just passing laws. These are, it's a grander situation here. And in the town of Blackstone, we do have approximately 15% of the population that has active firearms. Millville is just about similar. So most of those people that have those active firearms licenses do have multiple firearms. So we do have a lot of firearms in our community. So our key events and why we do this training is obviously Columbine was the first one that really changed everything. April of 1999, Columbine happened, and we had lost 13 students, 24 more injured. It's important. What I want you to look at is the duration of the event being 49 minutes. And we'll go into that as you see the other events that we look at and why that's significant. 2007, we had our first active shooter incident. I shouldn't say first, I'm sorry. Our first large scale active shooter incident on a college campus, Virginia Tech. And that we had 25 injured, 32 deceased, but it's the important, like I said, to look at the last one being duration of 49 minutes. We're looking at 11 minutes now. So we've completely changed the way the event is happening. Sandy Hook, obviously the one that really hits home. Just passed the anniversary of it last month. This is a tough one. It wasn't too far from us from here in Massachusetts, and of course being our younger students. So we had 26 deceased and 2 injured, and look at the duration now. We're down to 5 minutes. It's important that we take away from this event that no location is immune. And one thing I really push and drive home to our staff and students when we do this training is that this can be, students who have not done this training, we do, staff and faculty, is that you can take this training and use it anywhere. It's not just for the school environment. We've all seen where these things have happened in businesses with nightclubs and places of business. We've seen it in obviously in our K through 12 and also university level education facilities. We've seen it in our places of worship. And of course, we've seen it in our government facilities and hospitals. I always say when I do this training, I have my brother-in-law is in the Marine Corps. He's been in for 25 years. And over the years, I've been on many of the bases with him. And I always say if these things can happen on these very secure military bases, they really can happen anywhere. So fire drills. Why is it that when a fire alarm goes off in a building, everyone's told to evacuate the building? I usually elicit the crowd response here. But of course, it's because we're not sitting and waiting for the fire department to arrive while the fire is burning around us, right? The best thing to do is to get out of the building, and therefore we can't, we're not subjected to the fire. The same thing with our active shooter. We'll get into what the ALA stands for in a minute, but the E being evacuate, we want to get people out of the building. It's also important to note that the reason why these trainings are so important is that, we do fire drills 4 times a year by law. And we haven't lost a child in a building at a K through 12 facility since 1954, 1955. Obviously, we've lost students a lot more frequently in active shooter situations. So this is really important that we need to be driving this stuff home and starting to roll this out in our schools. So our traditional lockdown, which most people here have experienced at some point in school, I mean, this goes all the way back to when we had bomb shelter training back in the 50s and 60s. We all just kind of lock down, secure in one place, and we huddle and we wait, okay? And we've learned that that is just not the safest way to secure our schools in these type of situations. We are waiting in these original old situations like Columbine. We're waiting for the police to create a perimeter. In order for us as police officers to get a tactical team on scene, we're talking, you know, this slide says 20 to 60 minutes. We're 60 to 90 minutes in our location, really, to really get a active SWAT team on scene. So clearly that's not going to be our best practice. So I asked you to look at those durations and those timelines. And we'll see here in Columbine that the students waited for 4 minutes and 10 seconds while the 911 call was taking place. And we'll look back here in the back corner. There was an exit to the facility right there. The librarian, to no fault of her own due to her training, was telling everyone to get down, stay locked down. And we've learned from our, obviously, after action of Columbine, that these students could have easily exited the building out the back door and been ushered off to safety. And they waited 4 minutes and 10 seconds for that intruder to enter the building, into the library. The second portion of this is that the police officers were waiting outside and securing a perimeter. Again, no fault of theirs, that was their training. We as police have learned that that's certainly not our best practice anymore. And you know, rest assured that that is not how these type of situations are handled now. We as police enter the building immediately, whether it's one of us, two of us, three of us, we're entering the building and going towards the threat. So we have our first real look at how Alice helped save lives in Virginia Tech. We see where the intruder entered the hallway in near room 210. There was no class in that room at the time. The intruder then entered room 211. Unfortunately, those students and staff, faculty in that room never really saw it coming, and many of them were killed. But as we see the intruder walking down the hallway, the students in rooms 204 and 205 mostly survived. And that was because they barricaded the doors and they evacuated out windows, second floor windows for room 204, they exited out the window. So we can see that proactive approach of securing and evacuating saved lives. And this was our first real case study at what a difference it makes. So what is ALICE? ALICE is an acronym which stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. Why do we use ALICE? Why is ALICE the gold standard of this type of training? Well, it's proactive. It provides additional options beyond traditional lockdown. It assumes that every event's not the same, because they're not. Everything is fluid. Everything is changing. ALICE is not sequential. One thing that we really drive home is that, you know, we're going to go into what all these terms, what ALICE, the acronym, is about, but we want to empower all of our students, staff, faculty, anyone to make whatever the best decision is at that time in that incident. So just because it says lockdown is the L and the E is the evacuate does not mean that we need to go through each stage. If evacuate's the best option, we can go straight to the E and evacuate. It's proven to increase our odds of survival, and it's also recommended by all these wonderful programs across the country, such as the United States Board of Education, National Association of School Psychologists, National Association of School Resource Officers. Big one I think that's important is that the Sandy Hook Promise endorses ALICE, Massachusetts School Safety and Security Task Force, and many other federal and state agencies use ALICE as their primary training for this type of incident. So what is our alert? What does ALICE actually stand for? So ALICE, the A in ALICE is for alert. This is our initial awareness. This is, you know, what's going on, whether it's through the PA announcement or text emergency notifications such as a one call. But most importantly, it's probably going to be the senses, right? The hearing of gunfire or the seeing of a mass casualty event happening in front of you. Lockdown. So with ALICE, lockdown is still an option. So just because we're not doing the traditional lockdown doesn't mean that lockdown is out. But what we want to see now is not just closing the door. We want to close the door. We want to secure the door. With that said, all the new protocol in the school for the last 2-3 years now is that all the doors in the school are locked at all times. That does not mean the teachers have to leave their doors closed while they're, during time on learning. But once we close the doors, they're secure. So teachers don't have to fumble around with a key to secure these doors if we're brought into a situation like this. So the door is secure, and then we're barricading the door with anything we can in the room. With desks, chairs, filing cabinets, anything we can to stop the intruder from getting access into the room. We're then spread out all over the room, and we're not just sitting in one spot. And we're also looking for alternative escape routes at that point. Is it best to get out the window? Can we go through a door to another classroom and get out to, a side door? Whatever our best options are at that point. And then we're hoping that 911 can be called and we can start getting some real-time information. So this is what our barricade looks like. We're securing these doors however we can. Tables, chairs, like I said, filing cabinets. It's important to note that in the middle school and up, 6th grade through 12th grade, our students are partners in this. We're not expecting a teacher to do all this themselves. The students are part of the solution here, and we want the students to help where they can. We have students that are strong enough and able and willing to help. We want them to join in and help secure these doors and lock this down in this situation. So eyes are informed. This is, like I was just saying, call 911. This is our real-time information. This is our what, where, when, who, and how, what's going on. The district has made quite an investment in school safety over the years. I'm sure most people have seen our vestibules that have been added at the buildings to secure our main entrances. Along with that, we've added cameras in many locations on campuses, and we're able to get a lot of that real-time information via camera. But of course, boots on the ground, eyes on the ground are where we can really get that real-time information that we need to get in and stop the threat. The C is for counter. So, we can survive an armed attack when we're not armed. And what is counter? It's not fighting. We're not saying that we want people to put their dukes up and go fight somebody with carrying a firearm. But what it is taking back control, and it's obviously age appropriate and a personal choice. We don't expect that everybody would be willing to get involved in these situations, to go hands-on, just like we wouldn't expect a kindergarten or first grade student to go hands-on in these situations. But what counter does look like is that it is just stopping the threat and stopping that intruder from continuing forward. So counter works because it interrupts the process of shooting accurately. In order for someone to shoot a firearm, they need to have target acquisition, sight picture, trigger control, stance, grip, breathing. All these things are going to even an experienced shooter shooting. Most of our active shooters are not experienced shooters. So when we can interrupt this process, this what we'll call the OODA loop, which you'll see on the next slide. Jason? Yep. So our OODA phase here, observe, orient, decide, and act. If we can interrupt any part of that OODA phase, we can slow down that intruder. So one of the other big pieces of counter is that we ask when we're in the situation of lockdown is for people to grab a hold of something, whether it's a tablet or a chair or a TV or whatever they can get their hands on. And if that intruder does get into the classroom, we want to see everything you have getting thrown at that intruder, because if we can disrupt that OODA phase, we can stop that intruder from being able to get their sight on target and making successful target acquisition. So this is what counter looks like. Like I said, it's not a fight. It's not a physical, fist fight. We're using whatever we can get our hands on. And this is office situation here in this image. Coffee pots, a fire extinguisher, chair. I always say when I present this class that fire extinguisher should also be used to disperse the extinguisher chemicals in the fire extinguisher towards the shooter. And then obviously our most important is evacuate. Occupants must have the authority to leave the building. And what that means is that, everybody has that authority. We're saying that, you must have that choice to go. Everybody has that choice to go. We ask that you leave all belongings behind. that we don't have our students or staff or faculty getting into vehicles. And it's important to note that evacuate works because it removes as many potential targets. It also keeps away from a need for parents to come to the scene. In the event that a situation like this happens, a one call or some other type of communication would come out from Dr. Delfaco and Chief Gilmore with rally points and places where we would want parents to come and their children. It's important to note that the public safety response is a multi-jurisdictional response. We obviously live in a small community surrounded by a lot of agencies. Something like this happens, we'll have officers arriving from Mendon, Uxbridge, North Smithfield, Millville, obviously, and of course the city of Woonsocket. So there's a lot of officers arriving who don't know our buildings, who don't know our staff and our students and our faculty. So it's just important that all directions and commands are followed. And like I always tell people when I do this class is that these officers are armed with rifles, tactical gear, and it's a lot of chaos for those officers. And they train over and over again. We all train in this in the summertime. We all do active shooter training. We do it multi-jurisdictional. We do it with other agencies. So we do train together. But these are a very chaotic situation. So it's important to remember that for the officers as well as the victims. And that's all I have. And I think we're going to open it up for questions this time.
Yeah, thanks, Officer Loudon. And just a couple quick things to those that are tuning in at home, or even folks that might see this later, because I think the link will most likely be out on Facebook, which I know will have further opportunity for people to view. I think there's a couple important pieces just to mention. As a dad with a sophomore and a seventh grader myself, I know how wearisome this type of training is, but more importantly, this issue of school safety. And so please know that we don't take these situations and nor do we take this training lightly. And I do want to highlight our most recent school shooting incident, which was at Oxford High School in Michigan. And I'm sure everybody tuning in or that will tune in later is very familiar with that. While there was certainly a lot of missteps, it sounds like from what has been reported, one of the things that was done incredibly well was the training for staff and students. And the speed at which that unfortunate situation ended is pretty significant. It was pretty quick in terms of how quickly it ended and how safe most of the school community was able to make themselves. And when interviewed quite a few times, frankly, at least from what I have seen and read, students and staff point back to the training that they had. And it was the training that Officer Loudon just did. And knowing when to lock down, when to counter, when to do all those different steps are so important. Again, not that we want people scared or concerned or panicked, but we just want to make sure everyone's prepared. Officer Loudon used a great example about the fire drills, and the importance of making sure that we actually do take action and we train our students on how to do those things. And so just quickly, I want to mention about what that training will look like moving forward, because over the next few weeks, we are going to be rolling out some training in our schools for our students and staff, starting with what we refer to as a tabletop exercise, where Officer Loudon and school administration very calmly, and parents will be notified in advance, of course. We would never do this without notifying parents in advance. We did do a similar drill, such as the one I'm going to describe in a moment at the high school just before the pandemic, just before March of 2020. So we do have some experience rolling this out. But we will start with what we call a tabletop drill, which where Officer Loudon and school administration very calmly read a scenario over the announcements, the PA system in each building. And we'll start with the high school. And then students and staff have an opportunity to process through what they would do in any given situation. It's a very calm exercise and a very thorough exercise that actually helps our staff and students think through a variety of scenarios, kind of in quote, real time or in the moment. At the conclusion of that tabletop exercise, there is a debrief or an after action where Officer Loudon and administration will process with the staff. And students have an opportunity to process with their teachers and counselors and administration before they leave. So we will be starting to roll this out very slowly, starting with the high school first and then the middle school in the month of January. Again, parents will have lots of notification. We did have a couple of parents when we rolled this out at the high school dismiss their child before we did the drill. We don't advise that, but we understand that every situation is unique and we respect that. So if parents need to do that, that certainly is in their purview. And in the month of February, we will be thinking through and talking through how do we work with our youngest students to help them think through these different scenarios as well, and thinking about how we have those types of trainings with our youngest students. Again, not doing so without lots of notification to parents, without lots of planning and prep work. I'm just mentioning it now because I want to forecast where that's going. And in planning with Officer Loudon and Chief Gilmore, we will be having a community drill sometime in the spring, where we will actually see, as Officer Loudon mentioned a couple of slides, or maybe the slide prior to this, it's a multi-agency response. And so we need to, as well planned as we are, we need to see how all of those agencies respond together. So I just wanted to do a little bit of forecasting of where we're going with this. And know that we will go very slow. We will give people lots of notice, but we do need to make sure that we're prepared. So let me pause here and open it up for questions. And if you can put your questions in the chat feature, they're going to be sent to Mr. Aaronworth, who will share them with the group.
We do not have any questions yet.
Okay. This is always the quiet, awkward wait time.
It's like this when we're in person as well.
Right.
It means it was thoroughly done.
But I do want to put it out there, if there are some questions that do come up later, or for those of you that watch this live stream recorded later, my email is dlaudon, Laudon, at blackstonepolice.org. And I'm always available to answer any questions that do pop up at a later time.
And if you can't remember his email, you can certainly send them to me. I think most of the parents have mine, and I can forward the questions over to Officer Loudon to make sure that he gets them. Anything in the chat, Mr. Aaronworth?
I'm not seeing any questions yet.
Okay. Give it another
I'm
minute.
being told that there might be a delay though. So it looks like there might be something coming through.
Okay, no problem. We can give it a few. Happy to give it a few minutes.
Nope. It was actually just an update from Jesse saying there are still no questions. There's about a 45-second delay though. So we want to give people a couple more minutes to get some questions written in. Okay, do you have an idea about how the tabletop drill will be different for the youngest students, or how more active drills will be handled with the youngest students?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a meeting at the very beginning of February with Officer Loudon and our elementary school principals, where we're going to actually talk through what's the best way to navigate those. There are schools that have done them, and I'll have Officer David speak to what he's familiar with. But A lot of the changes are around language and using the right words. For instance, instead of saying there's an intruder, on the second floor near the library, we would probably, change the word intruder. But Officer Loudon, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I've already began meeting. Well, it's important to note that for the entire valley, the Blackstone Valley, our school resource officers, we meet once a month where we collaborate, exchange ideas, talk about what's going on. So that with that piece, we've all discussed what other schools have done at the elementary level. So I plan on taking a lot of what I've learned from the other school resource officers and bringing it to that meeting with Dr. Delfaco and the elementary principals. And to reiterate, yeah, there'll obviously be some language changes. And, one of the biggest things is a lot of places try to make that tabletop and that drill kind of more like a game that the kids are playing, like they're hiding from something or they're running away from something. So it's going to look a lot different, but we are prepared to meet that challenge.
So we have another question that says, my middle schooler has his school issued photo ID on his lanyard. Is this so police can identify students during an active shooter situation? And if the IDs are for that reason, why are they not required to wear them during the day?
Great question. And no, it's not specifically for that reason. We don't require IDs be worn in all of our schools. We do issue them, but they're not required. But I will say, if the students have them on, of course, that's a very helpful piece. But that's not the reason for them.
Yeah, we have a whole team plan for our rally points as far as identifying students, contacting parents. So it's not really necessary for us to have our students walk around with IDs all day. Like Dr. Delfaco said, it's certainly helpful in this situation, but it's not something we require or necessary need.
There was a small clarification sent just reiterating that the student is at Hartnett, but I would just reiterate as well, the IDs are not specifically for that purpose. It wouldn't matter what school a student is at.
To Officer Loudon's point about the reunification sites, each reunification site, actually, Joe Pilagalarani, who's on our panel, they will be the leader of each of those sites, partnering with the police there and helping parents reunify with their children. We will have alpha lists by last name, by grade level, by class, homeroom, et cetera. And so that, if parents are concerned, well, how will they know it's my kid? We have a plan and a structure for that already set up in place.
And we have, like I said, the SROs in the area meet. We've actually have a collaborative effort in the case of not only a mass casualty incident, but any type of incident that's going to require evacuation of schools, where all the school resource officers from the Valley would respond to that school and assist each other. So we'd have kind of a force multiplier of officers on team to give us the assistance we need in these situations.
Other questions, Mr. Aaron?
I'm not seeing any right now.
We'll give it another minute particularly if there's a delay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if there's no other questions, then what we will do is we'll wrap up here. But what I would do is encourage, again, parents, guardians, as you're watching this in the subsequent days or weeks, do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. And even if you are paying attention and tuning in and you didn't want to ask in the chat, by all means, you can send me an email now. I'm happy to get right back to you. Or forward it off to Officer Loudon or anyone else for that matter that could be helpful in answering that. And also just know that as we move through the next few weeks, we will be communicating and well in advance before any tabletop drills are done, just so parents know exactly what's going on. So, and when that happens, if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out and ask those at that time either. Anything else from the panel?
No, I just want to thank the panel and thank any of our community that's out there listening tonight. So appreciate you taking the time to tune in.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us and give the update that there are still no more questions.
Jill, anything from you? Okay. Oh, you're muted, Jill.
Oh, am I still muted?
No, go ahead, try that again.
Just to reiterate, if there's anyone who does have any questions, just to make sure that they reach out.
Great. Okay, with that, we'll wrap up, and we hope to address any concerns you might have as we move forward with our plans. Stay warm and take good care. Thank you.